Welcome to today's roundtable discussion on the wrongful conviction of Bruce Lisker. In 1983, Bruce was just 17 years old when he discovered his mother murdered in their Sherman Oaks home. Instead of being treated as a grieving son, he quickly became the prime suspect. 2 years later, he was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. To hear the complete story in Bruce's own words, check out the previous episode, now live in the podcast feed. As we now know, Bruce was innocent. Faulty police work, unreliable forensics, and an overlooked alternate suspect led to his wrongful conviction. He would spend more than 26 years behind bars before a federal judge overturned his conviction in 2009. Bruce's story might have remained buried, if not for the work of journalists who questioned the official narrative. Their reporting not only exposed serious flaws in the case, it also helped pave the way for his freedom. Today I'm joined by Matt Lait and Scott Glover, the Los Angeles Times reporters whose investigation changed the trajectory of Bruce's case, and Jim Gavin, whose work investigating Detective Monsu adds another crucial layer of context to how Bruce's innocence came to light. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So to get started, Matt and Scott, let's get started at the beginning. You've shared that the case came onto your radar through a memo from Bruce's private investigator. Can you talk about receiving that document and what stood out to you in it?
Sure, I'll take the first crack at it, Scott. At the time, Scott and I had been covering police corruption, a scandal known as the Rampart corruption scandal. And we had been receiving voluminous correspondence from inmates, prisoners, saying that they were innocent. And we assessed those letters, like in terms of how far we can, is there anything we can add to those cases? Do they provide any evidence? Simply stating that they were innocent, may be true, but it would be very difficult for us to invest time to figure out where that would go. In this case, Paul Ingalls, Mr. Lisker's private investigator, detailed a really compelling letter why he thought Bruce was innocent, and provided leads for us to pursue, leads that Jim Gavin at the LAPD as an internal affairs sergeant had identified, actually had uncovered. It was the main one was that there was a bloody shoe print found at the murder scene that did not match Bruce Lisker's shoe, and that was only done at Gavin's request when Bruce had filed a complaint against the detective. So that some 20 some odd years later, there was an analysis on that shoe print, which was never done at the time of trial, and that was the key piece of evidence that got me and Scott interested in the case.
Jim, when you receive complaints, is it that you always follow up on them and that Internal Affairs does an investigation? I mean, I imagine a lot of people complain about their investigations once they've been convicted. Was this just a rare occurrence, or do you follow up on them, or how does that process work?
To be honest, that was the first time I've ever come across a case like that where the allegations were against the investigating detective. Normally, I was handling, the officer looked at me cross-eyed. I didn't like his attitude. They didn't have a right to come in my house. Those were the types of cases. And then all of a sudden this thing, which it was probably that thick of paper, landed on my desk one Monday morning. And it just so happened that I had completed all my other investigations, or those investigations I was waiting for additional paperwork. So I had time to go and read this thing and just take a look at it. And a couple of my friends in the office were saying, just close it out. Other judicial review. He already had his opportunity with the jury. The appellate courts looked at it. Just let it go. But he named a couple people that appeared to me would be easy to interview real quick. And they would substantiate what my friends at work said. There's nothing there, And inside the letter, it was, they recently found money in the attic. So I took steps that you normally would take as a investigator to check if that money had been booked, any entry, and there was nothing. So then when I interviewed the new homeowner, who happened to be a city attorney,
Mm.
he does not recall ever finding any money in the home. His wife was dying of cancer, was bedridden for 18 months. So he basically said there's no way she climbed up into an attic and found that money. So that right there, comparing that to the parole letter that Detective Monsu had written, brought into question, maybe there's something here.
Was Detective Monsu on anyone's radar prior to this case?
No, he had promoted. He was in charge of the detectives downtown in Central Division. There was nothing that anybody thought was wrong with what he had done.
So in going to do your investigation, you said it'd be easy to do a couple of interviews. You call him in for an interview?
No, I did not call him in for an interview right away because you always try to interview the accused last.
Sure.
So once you've gotten your whole picture together, then you bring them in. So
Right.
what I did is I requested copies of all the crime scene pictures, because that's one thing that Bruce and his investigator Paul could not get their hands on, is actual colored photos of the crime scene. They had all these photocopied pictures. And so I was able to get a hold of the crime scene pictures and just kind of started putting together the description of the crime and how it was conducted. I could not find the homicide book. That was missing. And I could not find Bruce's taped recorded interview. The only thing I had was a paraphrased interview done by Detective Monsu.
Mm.
All the other tapes were there of all the other interviews, but not Bruce. Which, again, when you're an internal affairs investigator, those are now red flags.
Mm-hmm.
You're wondering, okay, that doesn't make sense. And then this happens. And so just one red flag after another red flag started popping up and brought my attention to look a little deeper.
Mm. So, Scott, you kind of catch wind of this. You read about this investigation into Detective Monsu. You know, is like Detective Monsu doesn't have any connection to Rampart, right? So, what makes you think like, oh, we should jump into this? Was it kind of the stuff that Jim's talking about?
Well, I mean, first off, going back to Paul's letter, and what separates it from the boxes and boxes of other letters that we had at the time. This guy is an ex-cop. He's saying, I have never gone to bat for an imprisoned guy who says he's innocent before. And he provides some specifics, with respect to the bloody shoe prints. But even with all of that, I would say that we spent the first 2 weeks basically just trying to knock the story down. You know what I mean? We don't want to end up spending months and months on something that's going to go nowhere. And so, it's been 20 years and I don't have a vivid memory of all of this, but our standard practice would be to, see if this stuff, these key elements hold up. And they did, so in that first couple of weeks, we were able to learn that, about what Jim had done and the status of the case. And it seemed like something that was worthy of an investment of time.
And I think right before you guys got involved, I had looked at the crime scene photos and I can see where Monsu was saying, okay, this footprint matches the footprints inside the house. So I'm thinking year, 2001, 2004. Hey, shouldn't we have a crime analysis guy that could look at that stuff? So I got a hold of the people downtown and I made an appointment. And so I brought the photos down to this guy and he had this big, huge magnifying glass. And I'm like, hey, I got these pictures. Here's the footprints going down the side of the house. The detective during the murder trial said that those footprints match those footprints inside the house and they match his shoe. But I found this other footprint right next to it. And I thought at the time, the one footprint was Bruce going in one direction and the other footprint in the opposite direction. So he looks at everything, and he goes, yeah, the footprint that he testified to is not the footprint that made the prints inside the house.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh, wow. And then he goes, however, the one you found is the footprint inside the house. And I went, uh-oh. That's when I realized, oh, this is getting bad. This isn't going the way I thought it was going to go.
So Mansu testified to it being the same at trial, though, without ever
Yes.
having an expert do it, and that all
Yes.
came in. Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
I think like Matt and Scott, we learned a lot about the procedures of the department, about homicide investigations, all at pretty much the same time.
So then what do you do with it at that point? You find out that it's an exclusion, sounds like, in somebody else's footprint. So where you go from there?
So then I go back to the internal affairs. I went and talked to my bosses, and they said, nope, we're closing this thing out. You're not doing it anymore. And my lieutenant says, that motherfucker is going to stay in prison. Do you understand me? And I walked away and I went, uh-oh, this is definitely not going the way I thought it would go. So then I got a hold of Paul a second time, and we went and we had lunch, and I showed him the report done by our scientific investigation people. And he goes, Jim, you realize this is what's going to get him out of prison? And I said, yeah, I kind of been thinking about that the last couple of days. He goes, I need a copy of it. And I go, I can't give you a copy. He goes, how about if you say you went to the bathroom and I stole it? And I go, no, I can't do that, Paul. I said, integrity is everything we have. If they catch me lying, I'm done. So then I took a deep breath and I just handed him a copy.
Wow.
He says, you're going to probably get in trouble. I go, yep, I know I am. But at that point, I was just like, do I do the right thing? Do I just ignore everything and live my life? Oh, but this guy's in prison. What do I do? And so I gave him a copy of it.
You think without a doubt, if you don't do that, they kill it and Bruce is still in prison?
I can say without a doubt, we would not be speaking right now. And Bruce would still be trying to get out of prison.
Wow.
For some reason, they were just hell-bent on keeping him behind bars. And I can only speculate that you have the detective from the LAPD that was arrested and convicted of murder after 20-something years. That happened right during the Bruce Lisker case.
Mm-hmm.
You had two other people who accused the LAPD of putting a charge of murder on them. They were convicted and they were sentenced to prison. So you had at least 4 people during that same time that were accusing the LAPD of shoddy work involving murder investigations. And I think in the eyes of the news media and the public, they were afraid of the outcome. I mean, that's me looking back 20 years.
You think it's more reputation than it is thinking like civil suits or some combination of the two?
Oh, I think it's a reputation and civil suits.
Gotcha. What did you suffer from turning that piece of paper over? What did they do to you? I assume they did something.
Oh yeah, they immediately transferred me out of there and they sent me to training division. Basically, okay, so everybody knows that internal affairs is like the golden ticket. You're there to stamp, oh, I've done administrative work. I've gone and I've investigated possibility of bad cops. So now they're going to trust me in bigger assignments and more influential assignments. That didn't happen. And they just shipped me off to training division. So, I mean, it was a long process. But I ended up as the homicide lieutenant for the San Fernando Valley when I retired the last year I was there.
So ultimately it worked out for you.
Ultimately, it worked out. Obviously I wanted to promote to captain, commander, whatever. That never happened. And, my whole thing was just when I took over detectives, it was just making sure these people had solid cases. That they were just putting, there wasn't this pressure from management to solve a crime. I just didn't go for that. So I think I did my service by making sure there was not another Bruce Lisker.
Matt and Scott, where do you go in your investigation? So you've done your 2 weeks. You've kind of made sure that everything Paul's told you is in fact true. Where do you go from there?
So, I mean, we decided like if we're going to delve into this at the time, 20, 30-year-old murder case, the first thing we needed to do was understand everything there was to know about the original case. So we spent a couple of weeks reading the murder book and the trial transcript, which, this had, there'd been a number of appeals. It had bounced her along for all these years. So things like that were attainable. We got them, and Matt, I don't know what, 2-3 weeks, I think we just kind of hunkered down and read up on all that stuff. So we had a firm grasp of what the prosecution said at the time. That was our first step.
Yeah, this is when those two started harassing me.
I was going to ask, when did the communication start?
Objection.
It happened like on a Sunday night. I get a phone call from Scott, and he's going, "Hey, this is Scott Glover from the Los Angeles Times. I just want to let you know that Chief Burkow is going to look for criminal charges against you for releasing confidential information." Well, what they did say is tomorrow you're going to be relieved of duty, and then you're going to be assigned home. And I'm thinking, no way, not me. I had worked in the chief's office. I go to work the next day. I get a tap on the shoulder. The captain wants to see you. I sit down in the captain's office. Yeah, we decided that we're going to assign you home. Oh, okay. And I did it just like that. And she goes, well, you're not taking it that bad. And I go, well, I got a phone call from the LA Times saying this was going to happen. I had plenty of time to get ready for it. Nobody knew about this. Well, obviously they did. And sure enough, I got assigned home. And then I think on my way home, or maybe after, I called and I said, what do you want? And I gave him everything I had.
Well, from there, after getting the case file, the transcripts, and going through that, and having our conversations with Jim, we also wanted to reach out to the prosecutor in the case, Philip Rabichow, who had recently retired. And we also wanted to talk to Mansu. And, we additionally wanted to speak with Bruce, but in the kind of in the order of it, we wanted to hit Bruce last. We wanted to understand as much as we could. And, we're not working for Bruce. We're not on his side. We're trying to, get to the truth of the matter. And so we called Rabichow, asked if he would be willing to sit down and meet with us. We told him about the bloody shoe print, and he agreed, which we thought was surprising, but also impressive. He wanted to hear about it, and we understood that this was an old case, and his memory wouldn't be, up to date. So we sat down. We explained what we were working on. He had asked us if we had certain files, which we did, certain transcripts. He wanted to see his openings. He wanted to see his closings. He wanted to see his certain witnesses' testimony. And so we provided all that to him and agreed to have another conversation after he had gone through that material. It was clear he was unsettled by the footprint, but he thought there was other evidence that made for a strong case. So while that was going on, we also then called up Mansu. And again, to our surprise, he was willing to sit down with us. And unlike Rabichow, who was taking it seriously and reflective and trying to understand the evidence of the case, I think my impression, and maybe Scott shares it, was that he was shooting more from the hip. He had the facts wrong. He contradicted himself. We asked him, hey, we understand it's a long time. Do you want to take a look at the file, refresh your memory, and then have another conversation? And he wanted none of it. He was very dismissive and kind of confrontational, and was not happy that he had been accused of misconduct. So he was, he had all that going as well. We walked away from that interview thinking he didn't really have a full grasp of the evidence. And that was the last time that he agreed to speak with us. And then we went and saw Bruce.
How did that go?
I mean, like Matt said, we kind of made clear to Bruce from the outset, like, we're not your buddies, we're not your defense counsel, we're not your advocates. We're here because we are pursuing a story that you know seems to indicate that you may be wrongfully convicted, and we want to do all the research that we need to do to try to find out if that's the case and nail that down. And we're like, please, whatever you do, don't lie to us, because we won't be back. And we were looking for, you can't look at a human being and tell if they're lying or not, but you can tell if they're suggestible. You know what I mean? If they are, looking to see what you want to hear, that kind of thing. And Bruce was not. We did not detect any of that kind of behavior. As I recall, he had some sort of rudimentary website at the time where he had made like a statement of fact, statement of the case, and there were a number of points that he made on there. And so we were looking for any divergence from that. We saw none. Um, I believe to this day there's not a single statement on there that is false, that is provably false, which I think is impressive, given that he's a 17-year-old on drugs on the day of the crime, and he's locked into a statement like in the early hours afterwards. So that is something that has always kind of caught our attention. But it was I think it was in Mule Creek State Prison. We met with him for maybe an hour, and again, it was just to sort of size him up, and we walked away without any particular reservations.
When was that? Like roughly what year do you think?
Late 2004, early 2005.
Wow. So he's been in at this point for 20 years, approximately.
Yeah, 21.
Yeah.
Yeah, or, 20. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Wow.
Because I went up there twice
Hmm.
to meet with him. Once from like 10 o'clock in the morning till 5, and then the next time for about 4 hours.
Wow.
And just went over every piece of document he had. And just so I could get a better understanding. What you want to do is lock people into their statements. I'm sure that's like what you guys do, Scott and Matt. Lock them into their statement and then see if I can take it apart. And so one of the things that came up is he talked about his friend, the alternate suspect. I'm trying to remember his name now.
Mike Ryan.
Mike Ryan. Okay, so you go from when I took over homicide, I sat and watched every interview. And every interview starts this way. Please tell me who you are. Tell us about this. And they just kind of get these people to be relaxed and feel comfortable. Do you want to drink? Do you want to smoke? Well, when Mike Ryan got pulled in, Monsu goes, hey, look, I'm Andy Monsu. I'm a detective from the Los Angeles Police Department. I work Van Nuys Division. I'm here to investigate the murder of Dorka Lisker. I already have a suspect in custody. All I need to do is eliminate you as a suspect. So why don't you tell me what's going on? And by the way, I already know you went to a motel in Hollywood.
Wow.
Okay. So during that interview, when he was obviously lying, obviously misleading, Monsu kept on reminding him, I only have one ticket to get home on, and that's for me. I'm just here to eliminate you. Oh, okay. Well, if you find any blood in my room, that's because I stabbed a black man the night before. And by the way, you didn't check into that room at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You checked in at 11. So there were so many, like, they just stood out lies by Mike Ryan that Monsu didn't pick up on, didn't want to pick up on. I'm not sure.
Well, that was going to be my next question. Is it that he was locked in? This is tunnel vision. He's locked into his story, or is he like? Is there some malice here? Like, what? I always try to put myself in their shoes and understand why you might do a particular thing. But
okay, so I know he was a detective trainee before he went to homicide as a detective. So a detective trainee is somebody that's showing interest in becoming a detective, and they let you work a couple tables to see how well you're organized, your interview skills, and so on. So there was an assault with a deadly weapon, like a road rage, that occurred 9 months before the murder. And Bruce Lisker was the suspect in that case. So Monsu was given that case to investigate. So that's the first interaction between the two of them, was June before the murder. And nothing really ever came of that case, and it just moved on. But then when Monsu saw Bruce that day of the murder, I'm sure that he realized who he was dealing with. Just a punk-ass kid, addicted to drugs, and it just went south from there.
Did following this case, did anyone go back? Like, was there a systemic review ordered of Monsu cases, or was was LAPD's position this was like, the rare one case Monsu screwed up? Did that ever? Anyone?
Boy, I don't know.
Scott,
Well,
Matt,
I think the department's position was that Lisker was guilty, and they continued to fight it. So it wasn't like they had some great revelation, after our story or after he was even released from prison. You had asked the question about, why did he do it? I mean, I think, and this is just my opinion, but I felt like it was very sloppy police work. From the bloody shoe print that Jim found or analyzed, that was seemed like it would be a basic step. He made some assumptions about Lisker's alibi and what he could do, how he could see into the house. He didn't identify the phone call that was made like an hour before the slaying, which very closely matches Mike Ryan's mother's phone number. He claimed that there was money missing when, in fact, we discovered that the money was actually in the purse the whole time. So there was a lot, that just did not go fully investigated.
I was going to say most notable, I think, is that we can't know what was in Monsu's head, but there's that Post-it note in the murder book that has Ryan's date of birth wrong, some numbers transposed, and so likely at this key time, he believes that Ryan has no previous criminal record. We were able to find out that he did have an incident a few months prior to Dorka Lisker's murder, where he held a knife to the allegedly, I think actually he's convicted of holding a knife to the throat of a fellow teen over a few dollars. Definitely exhibited some violent behavior that I think would have caught the eye of an open-minded investigator at that time, and he seemingly was unaware of that. And of course, Ryan went on to engage in other crimes and attacked a stranger on a Muni train in San Francisco and went to prison for that. Had various other episodes before he killed himself.
So, I mean, there was a lot of other evidence that could have been discovered, or maybe was known, but then kind of just like ignored.
Well, I think one of the things these two pointed out was Rabbit Show. When you talk to Rabbit Show, he was like, I asked him, did you listen to the tapes? And he goes, oh, no, I left that up to Monsu. And Monsu says he eliminated Mike Ryan. There was no other issues involved. So, was Rabbit Show, was he overworked? And he relied on the IO to do his job, and then the IO failed him. Because there were some stuff that just, I think the three of us would agree, that just stood out. And I really believe, after watching all of the interviews I've seen since then, I really believe they would have cracked this little kid into confessing to this homicide, Mike Ryan. They had every avenue, all the lies, the misleading statements. He was put on a bus by the Mississippi Probation Department, I forget which county, to go to Ventura County, and they were transferring his probation from Mississippi to Ventura County, and he was given a court order to report upon arrival, and he never arrived. He never reported. And he had broken into, he had done some damage at his dad's place of business, and his father was done with him. And so they were transferring him to California to live with mom. in Ventura, and that's where that phone number comes from too. So you have to wonder. I mean, all of a sudden he appears at Bruce Lisker's parents' house the night before the homicide, and then all of a sudden he disappears again. Where did he go?
Mm-hmm.
And all of that was right there for Monsu to see, but he just failed to see it.
There's another player in this case. So the federal court found that Bruce also received ineffective assistance of counsel. It's the defense attorney's job to also go through and listen to all these interviews, right? And so couldn't that have been a way that this all gets exposed? And did you all ever talk to Bruce's defense attorney, trial attorney?
We attempted to. He had become a Superior Court judge, declined to meet with us. I think he ultimately testified at Bruce's evidentiary hearing in support of his petition.
So I guess, again, correct me, guys, Bruce's dad was heavily involved in the music industry or in Hollywood. He was an attorney. He had a lot of people that he knew. And when I spoke to his attorney, who became the Superior Court judge, he said there was a guy that was heavily involved, a friend of the father, that kept on telling him, just plead guilty, you'll get out by 25. Plead guilty, you'll get out by 25. And so, guys, if you want to...
Yeah, no, I think there was a family friend who was an attorney who I think was advising Bruce and his dad as to, the state of the evidence and, the I guess, cost benefit of pleading guilty, so he could serve a term in juvenile detention.
I think that really, as I recall, that really came to the fore with the emergence of Robert Hughes, the jailhouse informant. You see, you now had somebody inside jail saying that Bruce had confessed. And, if I recall Bruce telling it was that this guy, it was at that time where he's like, you're going to get convicted of first-degree murder and you're going to go to prison for the rest of your life. And Bruce was, dead set against pleading guilty, but was convinced otherwise around that time.
That's a tough thing, especially given the time to overcome. I think if that's what you have today, it's a different thing. But
yeah, we did a whole thing on the whole story investigation into the informant and how he had miraculously heard the confessions of 2 or 3 other inmates and seeking a reduction in his prison terms.
It's always interesting how that you get those repeat snitch offenders, if you will.
Well, they did a large Los Angeles County, what is that called? Investigation on informants.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they discovered a lot of flaws and missteps in that whole process.
Yeah, it was a grand jury investigation.
That was the one where they had some guy, some jail inmate, I think, was able to live, or not live, but 60 Minutes did a segment where this guy was able to demonstrate how you could gather information and then fabricate a confession. Mm-hmm. It was a huge scandal back in the day. I don't know, late 80s maybe.
No, it was around this time period.
Yeah.
Very
I think
close.
it continued all the way through.
What was nice is I got kicked out, sent to training division, and basically these two took over the investigation.
Well, that's
and
actually what I was going to
discovered even more stuff. The money in the wallet was huge.
That's Matt. That's Matt.
Yeah, so yeah, and then how many stories did you publish in total? And obviously you continue to follow this. What did you continue to discover as you kept going?
Well, after our story, we had already planned to do this, but we were going to reach out to the jurors who sat, and a number of them spoke to us and said they never would have convicted Bruce had they known the evidence that was in the article that we wrote. As I reflected on this case and our role, but I think that the role of so many others, it was really. Things went so wrong for Bruce at the beginning. And then in the end, given the odds of trying to overturn a conviction, they went so right. He wouldn't be here were it not for Jim Gavin. He wouldn't be here were it not for Paul Ingalls. He wouldn't be here were it not for Phil Rabichow, who actually took it seriously. I mean, reflected on what the original case was, but wasn't afraid to confront, the evidence as it was seeming, was changing.
I think, Matt, and I think that alone cleared my conscience of being this overzealous IA investigator, because I was getting labeled as I was too involved in the case, that I lost my investigative hat, and now it was like I had to prove this. And
Yeah.
that was so far from the truth. But I think with Rabichow coming forward and making those comments helped me tremendously in my own mental health,
Yeah.
because it was like, okay, it's not just me.
It showed me, what happens when people take their job seriously and do the right thing. And it's not about winning or losing. And I don't know if we're going to discuss this later on, but, we obtained some internal LAPD emails, years later, that showed what they were thinking and how they were approaching this at the time that Scott and I were doing this. And it's revealing, I think, that their mindset at the department was really not to review it with a open mind, was to try to lock it down, was to try to wish it went away and not engage with it. And that to me seems it's disturbing. It should be about whether somebody is actually guilty or not.
Because they had told you that they had the footprints reviewed again, right? And they did not.
That was the shoe impression on the victim's head,
Right.
which was another thing that was like toward the end when we were about to publish, they said they had done another review of the evidence and discovered new evidence in the coroner's photos that revealed a shoe pattern on the victim's head. And they told us that it matched Bruce Lisker's shoes. And we're like, well, wait a second. So, we have the scientific analysis from the shoe print in the house. Where is it on the head? Show us that. Prove it to us that you actually, have done that work and matched it. And they hadn't. And to their credit, they said they would do that, and they did. But it was a kind of a nerve-wracking period of like, well, maybe there's evidence that shows that Bruce stepped on her head. That would be a tough one to explain away. And there was toward the end of our investigation, we were brought into the LAPD and we were escorted into a conference room with, half a dozen to a dozen other LAPD leaders. And they wouldn't give us the report, but they read us the report. And when they read it, we're trying to follow along, the shoe impression in photograph G versus photograph F. And, and when they were done, we're like, well, wait a second. So what you're saying is the shoe impression on the victim's head and the shoe impression in the blood do not match Bruce's shoe. And they said, yes. And we're like, well, then what does that, isn't that the end of it? And they said, well, it muddies the waters, but we still think Bruce did it. And that just seemed odd.
So was the purpose of that meeting to try to get you to not report anymore? Like, what was their thought there?
No, they felt like they had to, not only, they had to disclose that to the DA and the Attorney General because it was new evidence that they had found and they were compelled to. And they knew that we were on them about it. And so they, as much as we had I would say, somewhat adversarial relationship with them at times, it was also professional in that they provided that information to us.
How shocked were you, Scott, when and I'm going to read the email because I read it, and I read the set of emails that came out later. But how shocked were you when you guys got your hands on it and realized what they were talking about, and that your names were being tossed into emails like that? What were your thoughts?
I'm always so conservative in these situations. I mean, it was certainly gratifying to read. and sort of this amazing look behind the curtains. You always wonder what's in the minds of others, and here you see it committed to writing. So it was very interesting in that regard, and it wasn't until sometime after the fact that we learned what was happening. But I wanted to take forgive me because I'm going to repeat a little bit what Matt said, but it's like the one thing that I wrote down, so I want to make sure to say it. When I look back on this, like what I am most struck by is the extraordinary confluence of events that were required to have this happen. Like, this is not a DNA case. There's nothing, no single piece of evidence that says he didn't do it. And so I will repeat a little bit of what Matt said, but maybe add to it a little bit, which is, the people and things required. It starts with Bruce himself. He was an excellent advocate for himself, in the way that he spent his time behind bars trying to prove his innocence. It was, Paul writing this letter and the way that he wrote it that got our attention. It was Jim, not looking the other way and doing his job and kind of laying the foundation for this to move forward. It was Rabichow, who I would say rather courageously engaged in this. The easy thing to do for him is no comment, or I'm retired, I don't have time, whatever it might be, to just not engage. And then the magistrate, Ralph Zarefsky. This guy rolled up his sleeves and dug into this case. You know what I mean? And granted an evidentiary hearing that I think is a very low percentage sort of thing. Most of these things do not get hearings. I don't know what it is. You would know,
confirm.
right? As an attorney, it's like what 5%, 10%.
Less.
Okay, it's
Less than
tiny.
that. Yeah.
And so Zareski really kind of meaningfully, he knew the case. I've never met the man, but I could tell from his rulings and his analysis and all that, he really deeply delved into the case. Bruce's lawyers, Bill Janego and Vicky Podboretsky, just tremendous attorneys who, frankly, dismantled the case. And we watched that happen. Absent really kind of all of those players, this never happens. And what's scary about that is when you think about the boxes and boxes of letters that Matt and I had after writing about Rampart. Some of them were easily dismissed. Others very, like, you don't know, but it's just like you can't justify delving into this thing that in likelihood is not going to result in a story, is not going to lead somewhere, because you don't have that letter, you don't have these other things going on. And so that is kind of what I am most struck by. As far as like what we brought to the table, I think the most meaningful thing was the recreation. And that led from, Rabichow being willing to engage. And it actually, this is some backstory. We gave him that stuff. We gave him time to read about it or whatever. And there was a point in our story where he said, "Look, I remember why I was so convinced that Bruce did it." And he had gone to archives and pulled out, photos and all that kind of stuff, even though he was retired. And he had a photo that he showed us that, he's like, "There's no way Bruce could have seen what he said he saw." And the photo really it seemed that way. We were concerned, and but what it caused us to do, and Matt did this, is talk to the homeowners to see if they'd be up for letting us come out and take a look and kind of do a recreation. And so we spent some time extracting all the details from the court file. What was the size of the carpet, where was the blood on the carpet, where was the carpet in the foyer, and got everything placed just so. There was a planter that was no longer there, so we built a wood frame to approximate that. And we came out, and with their permission, after Matt convinced them, we did a recreation, and looked through those windows, and we were stunned. Like, it wasn't even close. He could see what he says he saw, at least on the day that we were there. And then Rabichow, once again, to his credit, agreed to come out there with us. After first agreeing that all of those measurements were correct, we had it right, and we did this little creation, and he came out and acknowledged that, yeah, he definitely could have seen what he said he saw, and I wish I'd come out here 30 years ago, something to that effect.
Well, that's another person to add to the list was the homeowner. I mean, imagine getting a call from a reporter saying, "Hey, there was a murder in your house some 20 years ago, and I'd like to come in there and do an experiment." You know,
Mhm.
and it was kind of touch and go. And really, the bottom line is I think what sold it was us saying, "Look, uh, I get it. It's a weird thing, and I know it's an unsettling thing, but somebody's freedom, hangs in the balance here, and it could help one way or the other." And so they agreed.
I'm going to read the excerpt from this is from an email from LAPD's internal affairs commander talking about their options and whether or not to investigate Lisker's allegations of Monsu. Our second option is to do nothing, which is what we would do if Lait and Glover were not on this. There have been enough court appeals that Lisker's conviction would not be overturned pending some major piece of evidence, which is unlikely since Ryan is dead, as well as our victim. I mean, it's very clear you all pushed them to do more than they otherwise would have. I think that's abundantly clear. The three of you, really. Jim, if you don't hand him that piece of paper, Matt, Scott, if you don't continue to publish stories, Bruce, you're right, Scott, you're right, Matt. Unfortunately, of the 3,500 people that have been exonerated since 1989 in this country, I would say the vast majority of them are the lucky ones. Some are just, we went and did the DNA testing we should have done, and that, but most are the lucky ones. So,
The thing that struck me, just one last thing that kind of always struck me after this, this experience was that even after our story came out, even after the jurors said what they said, even after the judge ruled the way he ruled, the DA then refiled charges against Bruce. And I mean, they ultimately had to dismiss them because they had no evidence, but just that mindset and that, uh, refusal to kind of like look at the case and the evidence was disheartening.
do you think, since Bruce's exoneration, since they dismissed the charges and since that time frame, there's been a bunch of conviction integrity units and conviction review units pop up around the country. Some are in name only. Some actually have resulted in exonerations. Do you think that there's been a shift in the country in the legal system as we've seen these exonerations happen, and since Bruce's case even?
I mean, I don't really feel qualified to answer that. I mean, Matt and I, I mean, our beat sort of morphed into the underbelly of law enforcement at one point, but that was a long time ago. And, I've not been steeped in that part of the criminal justice system in more recent years. So, I would say a factor that occurred to us at the time when we were doing that sort of reporting is that, uh, prosecutions are supposed to be in the interest of justice, and there's this pressure that prosecutors will talk about privately to win cases and to file and to get numbers and all that kind of stuff. And until that culture is changed, you're going to have this tension. You know what I mean? So you hear talk about it for sure, and I think that that you see some evidence of more progressive offices and so on. But how much the needle is moved, I don't really know.
Jim, you have any thoughts on it?
I would say you would need to get these law enforcement organizations to actively participate in these types of investigations. The biggest stumbling block that Bruce had was not getting the colored pictures and not getting all the reports. And the only way he was able to get that is through me
Mm-hmm.
and my ability to take a look at everything. But once they cut me off, then it was left up to these two guys to take it and run. But I think you have to get all of the cooperation, whether it's the prosecutors, the homicide investigators, or the individual departments that are being accused of a faulty investigation, have to, in good faith, participate in these.
I mean, when it comes to the most courageous characters in this story, I would definitely put Jim right up there with Rabbit Chow. I mean, these are the people kind of that had the most to lose in deciding to do what they did.
Totally agree with that.
The last thing I want to do, I see we're just about at time here. I wanted to ask each of you two final thoughts. How did this case change your careers? How did it change your lives? And how did you see Bruce change over the course of your work on this case? Yeah, all the way through to today, because I know, Matt, Scott, you are still teaching your class with Bruce on an annual basis. So if each of you could touch on those two things.
Well, I will. I'll take the how did it change our careers, because it allows me to share an anecdote that I wanted to share, which is we won a national journalism award for our reporting on Bruce, and we were in Washington D.C. to receive that award. And at that very time, um, we were waiting for Zarefsky's report to come out on the evidentiary hearing. You know, it had been, I forget now because it's been 20 years, but like Matt helped me out here, a few months. 9 months, something like that, that we've been waiting to hear what's this federal magistrate going to say about all this. We've laid it all out, in the paper. Our reputations are on the line, Jim's, everybody else's. And, here we are, we're in DC receiving this award, and we're both getting ready to travel back to Los Angeles when word comes out that the report is out. And as a source conveyed to us, after a quick look, that it something along the lines of it didn't look good. Yes. And Matt's already on the plane, and I'm, rushing to get to my plane. And this is back in the days when the LA Times, owned the Baltimore Sun. And I skip my flight, go to the Baltimore Sun, scrambling to get a copy of this thing on deadline because we have to write a story about it. And it's just this stomach churning feeling about what are the details, of this report. And, long story short, the person who had the quick look initially kind of, took it the wrong way. Zarefsky very strongly, expressed opinions that were critical of the evidence in the case, and kind of felt that Bruce did not, receive a fair prosecution. Yeah.
Yeah, I spent 5 hours on the plane thinking that Bruce's petition was denied.
Oh,
We were looking for, and of course, as a reporter, like you're looking like, hey, how are they going to say that we got it wrong? Well, where did we make a misstep? That sort of thing is a nerve-wracking experience. For example, I think this is when the AG's office went out and did their recreation. This was prior to the evidentiary hearing, right, Matt?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the California Attorney General, who's defending the conviction, they went out to the house as well with, laser beams and precise measuring equipment and like all this other stuff. And so we're wondering, like, how is our little junior detective reenactment going to compare, and in the end, we were solid, but it's definitely something that you worry about.
for sure.
I know you asked about Bruce. I think he came out in 2009 as a 17-year-old kid,
Mm-hmm.
completely unaware of how everything has changed in society.
And did
'cause
you all have communication with him, like right as he got out, or?
I talked to him that day that he got out.
Yeah, I was there the day he got out, and I rode back with him and his private investigator, Paul, back from Mule Creek to Sherman Oaks, where he had a place to stay. And it was very surreal. I think it was surreal for him. He got out of prison. There were a lot of television cameras. They did a press conference. And then I get in the car with him and his private investigator, and we drive back. And the first thing that he wanted to do was go to International House of Pancakes. He had been dreaming about that, it's in prison. And so everybody that was part of his release entourage went to the House of Pancakes, had pancakes, and then we went on our journey. And there was another time when it was for lunch, and we went to a Subway or Togo's or something like that. What struck me was that Bruce gets ready to order, and unlike prison food where they just slop it on your plate, he has all these options. So they're like, well, what kind of bread do you want? And he's like, what do you mean? And they're like, oh, Parmesan and, rosemary. He's like, white bread. And they're like, okay, what kind of cheese do you want? And it's like, he was stunned by that he had the power to choose what went on his sandwich. And there was a photographer who went with us, on this journey, documenting it as well. And at one point after lunch, Bruce goes into the restroom, and I'm like, okay, the guy gets, some space, but not for the photographer who went in there. And it was Bruce. There were no faucet handles. It was one of those motion sensors, and he didn't know how to run the faucet, and the photographer says, you got to rub your hands underneath it. And so he does. But it's like all these things are just kind of new to him because cell phones, everything, it just kind of like taken over. So it was kind of interesting. And now you look at Bruce, he's just he's a very smart person, and I think he's, adjusting well, post prison. He is very gracious with his time and our students who are very interested in what he experienced and how he managed to, go from that to where he is today. So in terms of it changing my life, I don't know so much about that other than it just underscored to me the importance and value of investigative reporting.
As you're talking about all of your experience with choices as people have come home, I've seen the exact same thing. When you strip people of choices and then you give them back, it's overwhelming. And it certainly takes time, but Bruce, having been home for a good chunk of time now, I think he's very much well acclimated, and it's great to see him kind of grow from his awful experience into who he is today. So, Jim, how did it change your life, and how do you think it changed Bruce's?
Wow. For me, it really questioned the LAPD, because here, my wife was third generation, and she was on the department with me. And not only did it affect her, it affected me. It affected my kids. It affected my extended family. After the report came out in the LA Times, my dad was an executive at Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and the FBI was doing an investigation, and they asked, hey, do you want us to look into that Bruce Lisker thing too? And my dad's like, just leave it, because enough had already been done. All I did is I just looked forward and said, you know what? People will know who I am just based upon me. And I just continued to be myself. And I think that helped me in the long run, because I still had 15 years to go. And quite frankly, I used to tell people it was just a little bump in the road. And I don't care where you're at, you're always going to have that bump. And it's, how do you respond to it? Do you get up? Do you keep moving forward, or you fall down and give up? And so I used to have to go to meetings with quite a few of these people, and I used to just go out of my way and put my hand out. I'm still here. How you doing? And I used to tell Carol, it was hilarious because they would see me coming and they knew they had to be on their best behavior. And all I would do is say, good morning, good afternoon, and put my hand out to shake.
Jim, let me ask you this. I don't know the answer to this. I mean, are there people, and I'm thinking more of higher ups, not buddies, at your level or whatever, but who eventually came to you and said, hey, you had it right on this, and I'm sorry?
Yes, the ones that attended your ethics class at the command school. Right? You guys did that you did an ethics class for our command school, right?
That sounds familiar.
Because a deputy chief came up to me one time and said, you're that guy. I said, I really got to commend you for what you did. So, but when I got to Central, that's where Amansu was stationed before I got there. And somebody handed me Mansu's old uniform the day that the article came out. The next day, he said, "That's not going to scare me away." And later that afternoon, he called everybody together and said, "I'm retiring." And it has nothing to do with that. And he went upstairs into the locker room and threw his uniform into the trash. And somebody picked it up and said, "Oh, this will be worth something one day." And they gave it to me.
Wow.
But I had a lot of people at Central compliment me for getting rid of him. But command staff, yeah, there were a couple that went to your guys' ethics school that would come up to me. Other people would just not even say anything. So, but then again, I mean, look, I got put in charge of detectives at Van Nuys since 2014. I was in charge of the bureau, I had 30 homicide detectives that reported to me. And so I looked at that and said, okay, they have forgiven me, or they would not have done that. Because I went from being this loose cannon, doesn't know what he's doing, uncontrollable, to now we're putting you in charge of this premier assignment. And I think that really helped me in my transition into retirement, because okay, I'm no longer bitter. Because I got up and I moved forward, because I kept a happy face, because I never felt like I never gave the idea that I was a disgruntled employee. That it helped tremendously. Now, there were a couple things that happened. One time when I was just made lieutenant at Central, this officer was working the front desk, and the desk is feet away. And he's just being abusive to a citizen, and I pulled him into the watch commander's office, and I go, "I don't know what's going on in your life, but I can tell you the LAPD bent me over and me, and I still come to work every single day. So that's what I expect from you. Whatever happened to you, those people don't deserve it." And he totally changed. So I used to do that with people all the time. Say, "Please tell me what happened to you that gives you the right to be bitter, because I got a big story to tell you." So I don't hold any bitterness anymore. I really enjoyed my career. No, I look back at this whole thing and just say, okay, I did the right thing. I hope more people would do that, even though it could cost you something. If I was to do it again, I would do it again.
That is definitely an evolution for you. I remember a time when we talked during one of the very raw times where, you're like, if I was to do it again, I would not do it again.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Well, I can say, because I've had a couple of cases out of Van Nuys, didn't know you at the time, Jim, but the folks that I've dealt with, you certainly had an impact on them because they have the same approach that you do. Truth seekers.
Well, that's good.
And I'm sure it's because of the way that you carried yourself forward from this case. So I think
I used to preach that to those guys, everybody, all the time, is, you know what? Just because you think you're done with it, there may be other information out there. We have to keep an open mind.
For sure. Thank you, Jim Gavin, Scott Glover, and Matt Lait for joining the show. If you liked what you heard, please share and tune in to future episodes. My name is Michael Semanchik, Executive Director of the Innocence Center, and you've been listening to For the Innocent. For the Innocent is produced by myself and Adam Lockwood. Our assistant producer is Ali Kavit. Our theme song is by Exoneration, William Michael Dillon. For the Innocent is a proud part of the Legal Talk Network, an InfoTrack company.